What's up, grinders? So today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to review a video from Mikkel, the Hyperpolyglot. I call him the Hyperpolyglot because that's what he calls himself. He says he speaks more than 6 languages. I think he's claimed 10, and he literally uses that title within his YouTube channel, and he also claims he belongs to a Hyperpolyglot association. So that's where the name comes from. And he made a video which is called 7 Ways to Learn Any Language in 3 Months. And I wanted to review this video because I've seen him drop a lot of videos, and a lot of the stuff that he does talk about is pretty common sense. It's what you would do when you're learning a language. Some of it's really good, I reckon, and some of it's not so good. Anyway, what kind of annoys me the most about the videos he makes is he claims that you can learn any language in 3 months. Now that's quite the bold claim. He doesn't say you can learn a specific language in 3 months. He doesn't say you can learn this language in 3 months based on these prerequisites. It's any language in 3 months. But then the claims get even more bold, and we'll get into that as we go through this video. So I'm going to watch this video, provide my feedback, and give you guys a realistic estimate of what I think is actually possible.
These 7 exercises are all you need to do to learn a language in 3 months. If you do them daily for 90 days, you can learn any language, understand it, and speak it fluently in 3 months or less.
Okay, so we've heard the claim. You can learn any language, speak it fluently within 3 months or less. So it's not just 3 months, it's 3 months or less. This is quite the claim. So what is fluent? Well, most normal people on the street, if you ask them what fluent is, they'll be like, and they'll give you a definition. It's basically a native speaker. But for people in the language community, what is fluent? Well, generally it's someone who can speak about pretty much everyday topics without any like stuttering issues, stuff like that, but not necessarily native speaker. So his claim is that you can reach at least a very high level within 3 months or less. So let's go through this video.
Why these specific exercises? Well, there are 2 main principles you need to follow if you want to learn something fast. You need to generate as many repetitions as possible, and you need to make as many mistakes as possible with immediate feedback.
Okay, so do as many repetitions as possible. I call you guys literally the grinders because, well, what are we doing over here? We're doing a ton of repetitions, and then we're going and using our language. So it's a good start, but this is pretty standard practice so far.
There are specific ways to do this efficiently in language learning, depending on the specific skill you're trying to improve at. Alright, let's look at the exercises one by one. Number 1. Listening while reading with English translation. This is the first thing you should do when you start learning a new language. This exercise is great to learn grammar and vocabulary. Also improves your listening comprehension and your pronunciation. But you're limited by the speed of the audio file, so do it at 1.5 or double speed if possible. Remember that you need to go fast to get as many repetitions as possible. Number 2. Listening.
Okay, I'm just going to stop this here for a second. So his first proposal is you've got to do just a ton of reading in the language, and then you need to have English subtitles below that. I'm just going to pick at the fact that this says any language in 3 months. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is learn the script of the language. Now, this is obviously more focused then towards Latin-based languages, because like with Chinese, you're not going to just open up Chinese and read it. It just doesn't work like that. Like, you're just going to look at it and it's going to look like chicken scratches on the dirt, man. That's pretty much it. And a lot of languages already don't have the Latin-based script. And even those that do use the Latin-based script, they're pronounced totally different to what you would expect. So we've completely skipped past that page, and he's saying here you're just going to read it with the English subtitles. Now, maybe I missed it. Let me just double check that. Maybe he said you're just listening to it. Let me just double check.
Remember that you need to go fast. You're limited by the speed of the audio file, so do it at 1.5 or double speed if possible. Remember that you need to go fast to get as many repetitions as possible. Number 2.
Okay, so you're listening to an audio file while you do it. Okay, that makes things a little bit better. Still doesn't help because you're not actually reading it. You're just listening to the audio file. And if you're going to see some foreign script there and you're going to see English subtitles below, guess what you're going to do? You're going to look down at the English subtitles. Even if it's a Latin script, you're going to look down. So this is basically the same as watching a movie with subtitles turned on in your language. What are you going to do? You're going to read the subtitles, not pay attention to what you're listening to, and probably pick up very little, if anything.
Listening while reading without English translation. This is obviously more difficult than the previous one because you don't get the translation, but it's good for reviewing and also for active recall. This will allow you to know which words you know and which ones you don't know. Again, you need to get as many repetitions as possible, so try to go fast. 1.5 or double speed if possible. Number 3 is...
Okay, so basically then that's like watching a movie with the subtitles of that movie's language on, and then you're reading it, or you're more scanning it at this stage because you probably can't read it.
speed reading with English translation on. This is the fastest exercise, so it's the best one for reviewing as much content as possible. Do it only with text you have already read while listening. And if you can't speed read, then start learning. The average person reads between 100 and 200 words per minute. With a little bit of training, you can easily increase your reading speed to 400 or 500 words per minute. With some serious training to 800, 1000, or even more. All of these while retaining as much information as earlier. So it's definitely worth the investment. Do this to review all the learning materials you're using. Number 4 is...
Okay, so he's mentioning that you got to learn speed reading. Obviously, that's not part of the 3 months, so that's a prerequisite to this system. So first you need to go out, learn speed reading before you can even do this. Or is it actually part of the 3 months? It's not mentioned. I'm assuming it's not part of the 3 months. So clearly this is not 3 months now. It's already a little bit longer. Oh, and also, he goes into the fact that you want to do it as fast as possible. Anyone who reads something super fast knows what's going to happen as soon as you read super fast. You're not going to pay attention to what you're reading because your focus is on trying to go fast. So you're just going to literally read the word and within like a tenth of a second forget what you just read. So I feel like a lot of this is busy work. Like you're going to be busy, but you're actually not going to pick up much. You may pick up something if you encounter it over and over and over and over again, and it's a simple text. But if you're starting with native level content or something like that, you're literally going to pick up nothing.
Speed reading without the English translation. This is a little bit more difficult than the previous one because you will encounter some words that you don't know. It's good for reviewing and for active recall. Do this only with texts you've already read with the translation on. Number 5 is reading aloud. Reading aloud works on your speaking fluency, but it's much slower than previous exercises. Reading aloud is a great exercise. It's a simple and effective way to work on your speaking fluency with no pressure, but it's much slower than the previous exercises. You obviously can't read aloud as fast as you speed read.
Okay, so it's a little bit confusing because like previously he talks about reading and then he talks about reading out loud. So obviously previously you're doing this all in your head and here you're actually moving your mouth and your lips and stuff. So this is obviously the spot where you've got to slow down to do the actual reading. So previously you're not even, all you're doing is you're just kind of like mentally reading it.
That means it's not good for reviewing content. This is why there's no silver bullet in language learning. Each exercise has its place to work on a specific area. Combine reading aloud with the previous exercises. Speed reading for reviewing, reading aloud to activate the vocabulary, and work on your speaking fluency. Number 6, listening and repeating drills. This exercise improves all areas of your speaking.
Okay, so he's using Glossica here. Just a quick heads up for anyone who doesn't know. Glossica is a website that basically gives you a ton of sentences starting pretty basic and then going up to pretty advanced with native level recordings, and you can listen to them, repeat them back, and you're basically training your ability to follow the patterns and the accents and everything of the language, the rhythm, sorry, of the language itself. It's actually a great tool. I do recommend you use it, but I don't use it because I've got my Anki cards and I create my audio cards, which are all based on things that are around my life, like things that I'm actually learning and I need to know. So I don't use Glossica because there's a lot of stuff in there which is going to like focus on that I just don't care about at this stage. But if you don't want to create cards, I highly recommend Glossica, so this is a good recommendation.
Your fluency, your accuracy, and your pronunciation. Attention to detail is really important here. Limited not only to specific sounds, but also the tone and the tempo of the sentences. Use this to learn to speak in complete sentences using connected speech, instead of word by word like a robot. Number 7 is translation. Translation into the target language will improve your speaking skills.
Okay, first thing I've noticed, this looks like it's Google Translate. I don't recommend you use Google Translate. The way Google Translate works behind the scenes is it takes your target language, translates it to English, and then translates it to whatever other language you want. So you've actually got an intermediary language here, English, which can change the meaning. And for languages that are closely related, it's not too bad, but for languages that are pretty far apart, it can be pretty poor. To give you guys a great example, for Esperanto, yes, it does translation Esperanto. There was a period of a couple of years, it may still be true, where it was translating literally the word Esperanto to English, okay? So it's not a good tool. If you want to use translation tools, use ChatGPT, these language models, they're literally built for this type of thing. So I would not recommend Google Translate, but maybe this is just something that he's just used to using. Additionally, I will say don't translate from your language to like the other language with like a intended translation at the end. The reason being is because what will happen is there's actually many ways to say your target sentence. So don't sit there and look at an English sentence and go, okay, how do I translate this over? Instead, what I prefer is you listen to the target language and you repeat that. And eventually what will happen is once you've listened to enough of your target language, you're just going to know which sentences fit for which translations in English. You're just going to get that like understanding. While here, what you're going to start doing is creating like direct links between one sentence to another in the language.
Without a tutor, without moving to the country or having to talk to native speakers. You learn to think in the language and you'll identify and correct all your usual mistakes. We'll need a bilingual text for this. You can use learning materials like Asimil.
I will just point out though that, practicing your translation skills is not a bad thing. It's just not something I think you should be trying to do within 3 months of learning a language.
Or create your own bilingual text. I recommend starting with your language islands. You simply look at the sentences in your own language, you translate them into the target language mentally, you say them aloud, you compare them with the original ones and self-correct.
Okay, he didn't clarify what language islands are here. I will for anyone else. For example, a language island is where you create a bunch of sentences based around a very specific topic. Let's say it's cooking. So for that, you might create a sentence like, what are you cooking? And then say, I'm cooking fried rice. And does the fried rice taste good? Or do you need more rice? Like, you'll notice here we're starting to use a bunch of verbs and nouns which are all related to this very specific thing, and we're creating sentences around this. Language islands are a good idea, specifically so that you can get used to hearing natural, real language used in those contexts. And if you're interested in a specific area, let's say, for example, gaming like I am, it's a great idea. Like, for example, make a bunch of language islands based around FPS shooters, learn those... listen to those language islands via your cards or whatever, and then go watch FPS shooters, because then you'll actually hear them in use. So it's a way of focusing down your language and basically taking a big problem and making it small. And then you take all these small problems, you put them together, or small solutions, and eventually you'll cover the whole space.
You can do this verbally, saying the sentences aloud, or you can do it using pen and paper. I recommend speaking because it's much faster. Remember that it is important to get as many repetitions as possible. Language production is always more difficult than comprehension. So I recommend doing this exercise after the active recall one, with sentences that you can already understand. The more you translate into the language and self-correct, the better you'll get at thinking in the language. Your speaking fluency will improve, and you'll make fewer mistakes. Do these exercises regularly to improve your comprehension and your speaking skills. This is a highly efficient, science-based method to improve your ability to understand and speak any language fast. And I've got one last exercise for you that you can use to make...
Okay, so far I haven't seen anything that's special. Most of the stuff that he's laid out here, the groundwork, it's pretty standard language learning stuff. He did mention the speed reading thing, which I actually recommend against, because you're not going to focus on what you're reading. So I think that was 6 out of 7 points so far, and I'm not seeing anything that's like really selling it to me.
All the previous ones, faster and more efficient. This is memorization with associations. You visualize the words, you associate them with a meaning. Go watch my tutorials on how to do this. You can memorize over 100 words a day with this. Making reading, listening, and speaking.
Okay, I'm just going to stop it right here. So language associations, as you said, you visualize the sounds of the words and you fit it to some meaning. A great example might be, like you see a word in your language and you're like, okay, it sounds like this in English. And then I make a funny image in my head related to the meaning of this word, and now I've created this connection that will help me remember this word. There's an issue with this though. A big one, which he doesn't mention. The issue is that you're basically creating an abstraction layer. So you've got the core fundamental meaning of the word, like as it abstractly exists within your head. And then you've got the actual expression of that word. So the physically form, the sound it makes, all that type of stuff, the written form. And normally what I recommend with my card-based solution is that basically you create a bunch of sentences and then you have like one word that you're trying to learn or something, and it takes up different positions in these sentences. And then what happens is as you practice these sentences, you start to get the feeling for how this word interacts with the words around it and also its meaning based on the words around it. Instead, what's happening here is if you're just memorizing words based on associations, for one, you're memorizing these words as standalone words, which is a bad idea by itself because you're not actually learning the core meaning of them. You're working under the assumption that all these words from different languages fill the same semantic space, which means that, this word here in English, let's say date, means the exact same thing as the word date in Chinese, 约会. But it's not, because 约会 can mean I go on a date type of thing, but it does not mean the date as in the date of the month. So it's got a different semantic space, basically. So that's one issue. And then the second issue is that you're creating the abstraction layer. So you've got the core meaning down here, the expression of the word, and you're slotting in this abstraction layer where you've basically got to go down, dance around with this mental image until you land on what the core meaning is, and you'll be like, I know. Now, I understand what he's trying to get at with here. Basically, he's working under the assumption that eventually these associations will collapse in with the core meaning and also the word itself, and then there'll be no associations. You don't need to worry about that. But it takes a long time to do that. I've worked with associations in the past, and they can become a massive hindrance because every time you try to use the word, you actually start thinking about the association, and it throws you off. It's like a curveball. So you then end up following this little route. You get the word out, and you're like, Jesus, now what are we talking about, type of thing. So I don't think it's a good idea. Now, he mentioned that you can do 100 words in a day doing associations. Technically, yes, you could. But is that a very effective means? Not really, because let's math this shit. Okay, so if you're learning one association per word, I reckon you could probably do an association every 30 seconds because you got to visualize it, you got to find this association, you got to put it together with the word, and you got to revisualize it, just make sure it sticks, okay? So if you're doing one every 30 seconds, that means you can do 2 a minute, and then that means you can do 120 an hour, okay? So that means you're sitting there for just under an hour every single day for 90 days doing this, going, okay, the dog's in the tree, so that means tree. Okay, next one. This sounds like a man walking backwards on the moon, so man walking backwards on the moon with a flag, so it means flag. So, like, you're going to be sitting there for an hour doing that. It's a very bad method of doing, like, learning a language. Because I've tried it before. I've tried most of these, like, random type of solutions. I've tried memory palaces, all these types of crazy things. And it's not a good way. You'll have the association stick in your head, and it will still be there years later, annoying the hell out of you. So you don't want to be doing that.
Way easier from the very beginning. And that's it. Combine all these exercises in your daily learning sessions to improve in all areas of your language skills. Get as many repetitions as possible by reading, listening, and speaking the language, and make mistakes and get immediate feedback with translation. Do this for an hour a day, every day for 90 days, and you can...
He just lost me there, math-wise, because he said do this for an hour every day for 90 days. I just gave you an example of how long it would take to get 120 associations into your head. So if you drop that, let's say you spend 50 minutes just on pure associations. That's already your hour. You haven't actually used the language. All you've done is sat there making up funny stories for each of these words, which you have not learnt in context. So now you're going to have to do his speed reading, as he says. I don't think anything less than an hour would be very efficient. So then you're going to add another hour on top of it. You're up to an hour and 50 minutes. We haven't done any of the translation exercises he mentioned, which then, again, you're going to have to... You want to spend at least 30 minutes, I guess, on that. So now you're like 2+ hours, 2.5 hours, whatever. We haven't spoken about the fact that you need to create these texts. Maybe you can download them, but for a lot of languages, I'm assuming they don't exist. You need to research the stuff and all this. Realistically, following his system, you're going to be spending about 3 hours a day, okay? Unless you're not doing it, like, fully as he proposed. Now, this annoys me because, like, he says he's a hyperpolyglot and he speaks 10 languages. I'm going to take him at his word that he speaks 10 languages, okay? Maybe he does. But he didn't use this solution to learn 10 languages. Like, it just doesn't math. And if he did use this solution to learn 10 languages, he didn't do them in 3 months. And if we look at it realistically, let's say he speaks 10 languages. Based on this solution, let's do the math. 3, 6, 9, 12, that's 4 languages a year. 8 languages in 2 years. If he speaks 10, he's been doing his own system now for just over 2 years. I don't think so. I get the feeling that this guy's probably started learning languages since he was a kid, and he's learnt them up to this point, and he's dedicated insane amount of hours learning and using languages, probably professionally working with them in different environments. Just be honest, okay? There's respect to you. You speak 10 languages. That is a massive feat. Why are you trying to undersell it by saying you can do it in 3 months? Dude, you invested an insane amount of hours, okay? Don't lie to us. We're not stupid. You spent an insane amount of hours, and you know what? That just proves you're a highly capable individual. But now you're trying to sell that to us, that you can do it in 3 months. You can't do it in 3 months. The only way you could feasibly, somehow, possibly do this in 3 months is in a very specific case. One, you're learning a language which is closely related to a bunch of other languages you already speak, okay? You probably live within the environment where that language is used. The language uses a script you already know, and it has sounds that you already know how to pronounce. And then, after 3 months, you could probably get to super low conversational, okay? You're not going to get the fluent in any language in 3 months. Just, if anyone wants to think about this logically, any language, Chinese. Okay, well, let's scrap the entire script and we're just going to use pinyin. We're not going to bother with characters at all. I think that's going to make it harder in some respects because at least the characters provide a hint of what each of these words mean. At first they're a massive pain in the ass, but later on they become way more useful because you can start to get a whole heap of new words coming in and you're like, well, I know both of those characters, so I've got a pretty good idea about what that word will be. So I feel like there is no way that this works. And if it does work and he does actually learn languages in 3 months, respect to him. He's in the 1% of the 1%. I can't do that, and I doubt the majority of the people watching this video can, even if you follow that system. Clearly, this guy's brain is way bigger than mine. That's the end of the video. I'll see you all in the next video, and if you're not there, well then you got 3 months to learn your target language or I'm going to beat you to death with this empty water bottle.